Hey guys, Daniel James here, and today is the 4th of August, and I am currently back in the UK. For those of you who've been following me on on Twitter and Facebook and all that kind of stuff, for the past 6 months I've been living in Tokyo, Japan, and I'm currently back on my old UK setup. But I'm not in my studio in Battle. I actually sold that because I'm planning later this year to go and stay out in Los Angeles. So I sold that. I'm currently in my parents' house. So this is my old bedroom. As you can see, the nice flowery wallpaper. I'm here for a few weeks while while I get ready to move everything out to Los Angeles. But yeah, so as you may know, I've been gone for, I think my last video was 3 months ago, and there's a good reason. So before, you know, up in January, like I said, I moved out to Tokyo, and as I got out there, some work popped up, some really, really difficult work. I had some video game work, which I still can't talk about because the game's not out yet. So I did that, and just as I finished that and I got ready, I think I tweeted out, like, here come the videos and all the overviews. Another project came up, and this one was even bigger than the last, and this one was a movie project. So I had to take that on. I had to. So I took that on. And that ended up being a really difficult one in terms of deadline and how long I had to do it. I did stream a few times while I was out there, and I explained it to you guys. But basically, it was a very tight deadline, and I had Shane, my assistant. Some of you may remember him from the live streams. He came in and helped me with that. We worked remotely, so we called each other up from over Skype and all that, and we got that project done. And then I was like, yes, okay, I did it. I delivered it, and it turned out great. And I was like, okay, I know what I'll do. I'm going to do some videos. So I tweeted out again. I'm like, right, the videos are coming. And I have so many sample libraries now that I want to do videos on, like cinematic scoring strings, by cinematic sampling. That's awesome. I got one, I think it's called Eclipse from, is it Wide Blue Audio, Wide Blue Sound? I always get that wrong. I want to do one on that. And, there's just so many sample libraries I have ready to do it. And I was like, okay. So just as I was getting ready, I got another video game company asked me to pitch on a game. Like they'd heard some of my music, like my name had crossed their desk. And this is a big company. And I was like, oh, of course, of course I'll do it. So I pitched, thinking that, because as far as I'm aware, other people were going for it. And I was, with pitches, they're never a guarantee. So I was like, okay, I'll put a pitch in, and then I'll get to the videos. So I put a pitch in, and then, I was getting all the video stuff. I started doing streams again, getting myself ready. And they came back and they were like, oh, this isn't exactly, with the video game pitch, they were like, this isn't exactly what we're looking for. And I was like, ah, shit. And then there was like one day before, and I was like, is there any chance I could, have another go? And they were like, okay. And so I did like a last minute pitch, and they loved it, and I got the job. But the problem with it is it's also a very tight deadline and heavy workload project. So while I wanted to do all the videos and stuff, like I have to keep doing these things. But don't worry. I mean, once these things come out and I can talk about them, I will be going in depth with you about how I made them. So it's kind of like a delayed release, I guess. so so I'm currently working on those. But what I did say I'd do is I found my little GoPro in the process of moving. I found this little GoPro, so I apologize for the shaky cam. It's hard to keep a GoPro still. So I'm going to be doing like these vlogs and stuff, and basically keeping you up to date with what I'm actually doing. But I won't be able to show you directly, like the overviews, because an overview takes a whole day, and I currently don't have time to take a whole day off of work, in order to do one. But these only take 15 minutes or so to do, so I can do these. So what I'll be doing is I'll be answering your questions, and if there's any common Q&A questions, I'll do like a little separate video for those things. But yeah, I thought I'd answer a few of those today. So the first one is from Carlos de la Cruz, and he asks, can you lay out a composer's basic equipment setup for starting production? I thought that's a good question to start with. So when you're first getting started, like if you look at the setup I've got, it's very simple. Like I have 3 screens. I don't need them. I have M Audio BX8A monitors, which are quite cheap, I believe. I think it's like something like £300 for both, like not each, just for both. Which, as far as decent monitors go, is great. I mean, they're not the best in the world, I've heard, but You know, I've had them for so long now that I know exactly how they, you know, what music sounds like on them. So I've had those. So in terms of basics, so first off, you'll need a computer. This one's a Mac Pro 12 core with 64 gigs of RAM, but you don't need one of those to start. What you should be looking for with a starter computer is you need a decent amount of RAM. I'd say 16 gigabytes is like the minimum you can get away with. There are ways to alleviate it with SSDs, but I'll get into that in a second. So you need a decent computer with, you need a good CPU, and I seem to have found that more cores equals more processing. So like my 12 core, for example, I think it's only 2.8 gigahertz, but it's 12 cores, so I have a lot more processors with which to put plugins on. You know, so I can have a project full of plugins and it will run fine. So you want a PC or a Mac with plenty of cores, high gigahertz, and at least 16 gigabytes of RAM. And the gigabytes of RAM is when if you compose like I do with sample libraries, when you load a sample library in, it tends to, well, what it does is it loads part of the sample library that you're loading into RAM, so that when you push a key, it has time, like it'll load the bit in RAM instantly, which will give the drive, like the inside hard drive, time to load up the actual sample, like the rest of it. So the more RAM you have, the more things you can load into RAM. Otherwise, you'll be trying to stream it directly off the disk. And if you're trying to stream lots of things off the disk at once, obviously they're going to be at different locations on the disk. So you'll hear lots of clicks and pops because the drive's desperately trying to catch up. So that's the first thing you need. Secondly, I'd recommend a nice monitor, like a high resolution monitor. Doesn't sound important. If you can afford it, it's definitely worth it because you actually have more actual space with which to compose, and it's much easier to compose when you've got a better overview of how the whole track is coming together. Not essential, but worth getting. But going back to essential, so you'll need a MIDI keyboard. I have a M Audio. I like M Audio because it's cheap and they just kind of work. I have an M Audio Axiom 61. I very rarely go past the 61 keys. I mean, when you have an 88 key, it's great if you're doing key switches and stuff. But in terms of the notes you actually play, when you have 88 keys, you're at the extreme lows or the extreme highs. Both of which I very rarely use. So I have an M Audio M Audio Axiom 61, and as you can see, this one comes with all the faders and the controls and stuff, which I never actually use. You may have seen JJ in the background there. I told you we're currently staying in my old bedroom, so ignore all that for now. Trust me, I can work out of here. Anyway, but I never use the controls on those, so you could get away with a key station or something, which is just the keys, and that would be fine. And then I would also recommend, and this is like this I think I would call essential, is a small MIDI controller, and I use a Korg Nano Control. It's dirty as fuck. I apologize for that. It's been in storage for 6 months. But so I use one of those, and that I think is essential because most keyboards will have a modulation, modulation wheel, and a pitch bend wheel, which are great. But when you're using sample libraries, you also want to have access to things like expression. Some have like CCs, like I think LA Scoring String has one on CC 111, and there's a lot of CC numbers. And something like the Korg Nano Control, you can actually map. It comes with software where you can actually map it to how you want it set up. So like I have the mod wheel on this one, and then I have expression here, and then I have volume on this one over here. And then these ones I map according to whatever I'm using, on a specific day. And they also come with transport controls, stop, play, record, which I actually use, which saves you clicking up on the plate. It like one of the things, like one of the uses of things like this is it's not saving you a lot of time in the short term. It'll probably save you it'll save you 1 second. So instead of moving your mouse up to the record and play button, you can just push the button. But when you add those 1 or 2 seconds up over the entire day's work, you're probably saving yourself like 15 to 20 minutes, which 15 to 20 minutes of actual writing as opposed to moving the mouse when you have a deadline like I've got currently is invaluable. So I definitely recommend getting one of those. So what have we covered so far? So a computer, a screen, a MIDI controller, a MIDI keyboard, and then after that, all you need is either studio monitors. It depends. If you're in a permanent setup where you can make loud noise, get a pair of studio monitors. Like I said, I have the BX8A Deluxe, I think they're called, by M Audio. Again, not known for being the best speaker in the world, but I've had them for about 10 years, and so I know what good music sounds like through them. So I'm used to them. Like that's the thing with speakers. You can have the best speakers in the world. There will still be a certain amount of time it'll take you to know what good music sounds like through them. You'll be able to hear more frequencies, like in a more stable in the mid range. You'll notice things like that, but you'll still need to learn them and the room with which you're in. Okay, so if you get cheaper monitors, they may not be as good, they may not be as accurate in the mid range, but if you listen to them for long enough, you will know what good music sounds like through it, and you will tend to move in that direction. So your mixes will be better. Obviously, the more expensive monitors you get tend to have more flat frequency responses, which means that you're hearing it more accurately, but you'll still have to learn them. You'll have to learn. Anyway, so if you're in an environment like an apartment, like I was in Tokyo, where, late at night and things like that, you can't be loud, you may be better off buying a good set of headphones. I currently use, let me grab these. I currently have the AKG K712 reference monitors, and this is something I didn't know until I got to Japan, which is crazy, because I'm supposed to be the professional. But one of the things you want in headphones, so if you're recording instruments, you want something that's called closed back headphones, because that basically traps the sound inside the headphones, so no sound gets out of the headphone, so it doesn't get picked up in the microphone, and also no sound comes in, so there's lots of loud ambient noise around you. You won't hear it, you'll only hear the music. But the problem with that is the music feels like it's right here on your face. So it's hard to judge the spatial, the space of the music, or judge the, it's hard to judge the, how different instruments are interacting with everything, because it just feels like mush all slammed up against your head. And then the alternate, which is what my headphones are open back. Now these let a little bit of sound come in and they let sound go out. So, if you've got them turned up and someone else is in the room, they'll be able to hear what you're working on, but it won't pass outside that, outside your room. Upstairs in your apartment won't hear it, for example. But the good thing with these, and the good thing with my AKG 712s, is that they have such a wide stereo stereo space feeling to them that sometimes I forget that I'm wearing the headphones. The sound feels like it comes from out here, not here. So I'm able to judge how wide the music is and where instruments are in the 3D space, because the sound feels like it's off my head. Like there have been times when late at night or something, I've started playing the music and there'd be like the loud bum, and to me it sounded like it came from my speakers. So I quickly go to turn down the speakers so I don't wake up the neighbors. And it was, it's all because the headphones are open back. And these headphones don't have a lot of bass in them. Like you have to search around for good open back, and there is debate about what's important to you. For me, I wanted I wanted more of a wide stereo field, and I wanted like the high and mid to be more accurate. So I went with those, but the bass is a little bit weak on them. You can hear it, but it's just not as strong and full on as you may want. So that's one of the trade-offs, like you with headphones, it's a bit hit or miss with the frequency range, particularly in the bass. Like either you get too much or not enough, and the better they get, the more expensive they get. But that's one of the things you definitely need to have, either monitors or headphones. So let's cover what we said. So a good computer with good CPU and good RAM, at least 16 gigabytes, a decent working monitor, a mouse that's comfortable, and then a MIDI keyboard, a MIDI controller, and studio speakers or studio headphones. And that will get you set up, and then all you need is software. So in terms of software, you would probably want something like, first off, you'll need a DAW, which I'm sure you're aware of. So that's Ableton Live, which is what I use, Cubase, which I also use, Logic, Digital Performer. There's many others, Sonar, like all the Reaper. There's another one. That one's quite cheap too. So you need a DAW, and then if you want to do the kind of music I do, you'll need a sampler. So there's a few, like there's East West Play, which is a good deal if you just getting into it, because they have a subscription service where it's $30 a month. So something like that, or Native Instruments Contact, which is, I'd say, the industry standard by this point. And I will honestly say, if you only have enough money, like people often ask me what is the best sample library to buy. I really do recommend buying Kontakt 5, because the built-in sample libraries that come with it, like the factory library, I actually keep going back to, and I forget how much is there. It's got orchestra, it's got choir, it's got band, it's got synth, it's got everything. It's got wind, world instruments. You know, everything you can think of is in that. So, you know, that's definitely one to check out. And then beyond that is, you know, you don't need much more than that. That will get you up and running. So that's how you answer that question. So yeah. So the next question comes from Flight, who asks, when I have a few string layers, how do I keep the mix clean without it sounding overwhelming? All these questions, by the way, are coming from Twitter. So if you have any other questions, you know, please do send them in, and I can answer them in these vlogs. But I'll put that out on Twitter. Not hashtag. My name is @H2Daniel. But anyway, so how do you layer up strings without it getting overwhelming? So one of the things to keep in mind whenever you're layering something up is each instrument has certain frequencies within it which will always kind of be stronger than others. And when you layer two of them together, those parts which will poke out will sound twice as loud. So I don't know, like in terms of number, let's say all the frequencies are at 1, but there's a particular frequency that's at 5. When you layer it up, all the frequencies here that were 1 will now be 2, but that frequency that's 5 will now be 10. So it will stand out even more. So what you'll find is that when you layer things up, and even when you add things like reverb and stuff and such, which it does kind of act like you're adding, you know, that you're layering up, even if you're just putting reverb, is you'll find things that are called resonant frequencies. So these are frequencies that will jump out at you. So what I tend to do is whenever I do that, I will always just build it up until I get the kind of big full sound I want. And then what I do is I get an EQ, and I create like just a bell shape with a very tiny Q, not too tiny, but like a slightly small Q. And if you watch my video on EQ basics, you'll see what I'm talking about here. And what I'll do is I'll sweep around until a certain frequency gets very loud. It's normally quite painful, so do this at low volume. And I'll find that the frequencies which are really stick out, because you'll hear it because it'll start distorting. I mean, I recommend putting a limiter on your master bus when you do this, because what will happen is when you sweep, it'll basically, the sound will start crunching. It'll start going, so you like, because it's overloading the limiter. And then what I'll do is I'll just pull that back enough so that it removes that overbearing, you know, horrible sound, but not so much that it loses the overall character of the string. If you pull things down too much, you lose the essence of string. You know, like I'm using strings as an example. You'll lose the essence of the instrument. So, like I say, let's say a natural violin has 1 across the frequencies, but in the 1 kilohertz has a 5, and then it carries on 1. That's just what a violin sounds like. So if you were to take that 5 down to a -5, that's not what a violin sounds like. It will sound weird. It will sound odd. So what you kind of need to do is have a balance. So what you kind of want to take that 5, that what is now a 10, and now it's overbearing. You kind of want to bring that down just slightly, maybe to like a 7 or something, so that it fits with the now surrounding 2s. Sorry, this has gone really abstract, but it still sounds like a string, but it's not overbearing. And one of the things I find is that, particularly with things like strings and brass, is they tend to overload a lot in the low mids. And that's where things start sounding muddy. So what I'll do is same thing, I'll find where the muddy sound is, and I'll just bring that, but I'll widen the Q. So I'll bring it down by like 3 decibels, 4, maybe 5 if it's really muddy. Again, just trying to make sure it doesn't sound weird. Bring it down, and then I'll just widen the Q slightly until it sounds a lot more, or a lot less muddy. That's the basic way of doing it. And so as you increase the size of the Q, you're basically you're adding a slight cut to frequencies that are around the muddy frequency, which kind of overall brings the tone in. It reins it in. But in terms of a whole mix, another thing to keep in mind, just while we're on the subject, is to always make sure you know what instruments you want to be covering what segments. So for example, say I'm doing like a big action cue, something I'm doing a lot on this video game right now, is I have very big bassy percussion, a lot of Hans Zimmer percussion in there, the big low booms, the big taikos and things like this. But at the same time, they want lots of low gritty synths. So obviously there's a lot of things that will mush together there. And again, when you layer different instruments together, the same principle happens. So like if you hit a bass drum, the bass drum has different frequencies to a bass guitar, but there will be frequencies between them which, when layered together, will be too loud. So like they may both share like 90 hertz, for example. And then, so like I said, with everything's 1 except for 90 hertz now is a 5. If you layer another instrument which also has a 5 at 90 hertz, you're then going to get a 10 when you layer them together, so it'll be too loud. One way to get around that is you decide, okay, well, the kick drum and the bass guitar are both playing at the same time, so I don't really need to have them both have 90 hertz in it. So it's, what's more important? Do I want the listener to hear more bass guitar in the bass or more kick drum in the bass? And if you decide they want more kick drum, you can scoop out that 90 hertz out of the bass, and then when the kick drum hears, you're hearing the 90 hertz of the kick as opposed to the bass. So when you like apply that to a whole orchestra, it's like, okay, so I've already got my big low percussion and my big low synths down in the bass. Do I really need any bass at all in my strings? Because they're both playing at the same time. They're both very loud. So what I'll do is I'll just do like a low cut. I'll just cut all the low frequencies, anything under maybe 100 hertz, where you don't even really hear it because there's so much bass going on in that area. You're not, like, if you cut it out of the strings, you're not actually hearing any difference to the strings, because the strings are only really being heard above that because the bass is overpowering and taking, it's being taken over by the things which live in that zone. So if you cut it, you're not taking anything away from the tone of the strings, but what you are doing is taking all those, what would be ones in the bass, if we're going back to my abstract theory, all those number ones which aren't adding much, but they're just adding another 1 on top of the frequencies which were already full in the bass, and you're just getting rid of them. So you're just basically you're just reducing the overall muddiness by whatever the strings are, a 1 or a 5, whatever they are. This abstract term has gone too far. I should write a book on it. The 1s and 5s of life. Anyway, and I'll go and I'll do that for all the instruments, and that's usually how you end up with a pretty good mix. A lot of people think that there's a complex secret to mixing. It's literally like looking at it and thinking, okay, what's important for my listener to hear? I want them to hear the strings here, so we don't really need it in the brass here, so I'll turn it off. And one little tip one little technique I do is I will have different EQ settings for different parts of the song. So say like there's a part of the song where there is no kick drum, like there is no big percussion, there's no bass guitar, and it's just strings. All of a sudden I'm going to want bass in the strings because there's no other instruments. And if I've just left the cut that's throughout the whole song, like when the strings are by themselves, they'll sound thin and weak. So a good technique I do is I have separate EQs that have very specific settings, because I try not to do EQ sweeps because you start getting this sound when you're moving EQ around. So I have ones that are set, and what I do is I automate the on and off switch. So when I want the bass to come back in, on that beat, I turn off the EQ, which is a low cut, and I will have a separate EQ which perfects, the EQ for the strings being by themselves. And so I just have EQs turning on and off for any specific moment, and I tend to find that works the best. So yeah, so they're the 2 questions I'm going to answer today. And like I mentioned, if any of you guys want to add more questions, want to ask more questions, please do so on Twitter. My handle is @H2Daniel. But I thought I'd end today. Like a lot of people ask me, what's my secret to getting my sound? And I, normally I don't go into it because to me it's so easy that I don't even think it's worth mentioning. But I haven't done a video in a while, so why the hell not? So like one of the secrets, the secrets that I don't tell anybody about achieving the type of sound I do, it's very simple: resampling. Okay, so resampling is the process of taking a sound and then manipulating it or whatever, and then recording it again so you have a new sound. And I do this over and over again, and like to me, it makes perfect sense. So that's why I use Ableton Live. That's one of the main reasons I use Ableton Live, because it's very good with audio. So what I'll do is I'll make like a synth patch, for example, in Omnisphere, and then I'll play it out, and then what I'll do is I'll record what I've just played into audio, and that comes down to the main reason. So the difference between audio and MIDI. So MIDI is just triggering audio files, but you can't go in with the MIDI and edit those. Edit how that audio is being played back. You can only edit the MIDI information, which does kind of manipulate the audio, but not in the same way. Whereas if you have the same part, like a synth line, for example, rendered out from Omnisphere as an audio file, you can then go in and slice beats out. You can reverse parts, like individual beats. You can reverse individual beats. You can add audio effects, as opposed to MIDI effects on just like specific elements. You can do a lot more automation. You can move things around a lot easier to create, brand new rhythms and such. And also you can do different sound manipulations. So, pitch shifting per, on the audio wave files. It's easier to pull out transients and turn parts like one kick up and then one kick down. You can slice things up. And I genuinely think that like that is the key to achieving a type of sound like I have. Because everything I do comes down to audio at some point, and then I manipulate it into, to fit in the type of music I'm writing. And that's actually one of the ways I keep myself creative, is I have a folder, like a massive folder. It's probably like 5 to 10 gigs now, of just loops and stuff that I've made for myself. And what I'll do is, like, if I need a rhythm for something, what I'll do is I'll just scroll up and down and I'll just grab a loop at random, because I know I made them, so they're all going to be good enough for whatever I'm doing. But I don't know what it is when I choose it. I choose it and I drop it in, and then the creative part is me making that sound work, because I don't know what it is. So it's like, okay, how can I make this loop work for the sound I've got? And then I'll manipulate that loop, and I'll add effects to it. I'll cut bits out, slice things, change the transients on stuff. And then what I do is once that's done, I'll re-render that as its own thing. So then I have that change as a new loop, which will usually sound completely different to how it sounded originally. But it had the quality of a loop that I'd need in the first place. So then I take that loop, I throw it in the folder, and then at some point in the future, I will probably drag that random loop, pull it into a queue, and then be forced to be creative to make that work. So I'll manipulate it again, add distortions, add delays, add cuts, add transient designers, all these kinds of things, and then re-render and rinse and repeat. And that is literally how how I do a lot of my music. It's just cutting things out, slicing them together, and making things work. Because like a lot of my skills in composing are based around my ability to sound design and manipulate audio. So I use that strength, I use that skill to my advantage. So I have, I can work very quickly because I know that I have sounds which are quality, and I know what they do. I know that they will fit for the music. So I can just drag them in, and then at the same time as knowing it's going to work, I'm also being creative and original, because I'm manipulating them beyond what they are into something completely new. So, I thought I'd throw that little secret out there, because I do get asked that a lot, like what my secret is for doing what I do. But I've never seen it as such, so I'm absolutely fine sharing that with you guys, and I thought this would be a good thing to add at the end of a vlog, so that, I can clickbait you into watching. So, no, I'm joking. So like I mentioned, there will be more vlogs in the next few weeks than overview videos, but there will be overview videos once I finish this video game project, which I hope to have done by the 1st of September. So, a month of vlogs should be fun. And, occasionally I will actually play some stuff on the computer, but I won't be able to do it on screen, because, we'll be doing it with the laptop and such. In the next few days, I'm actually going to be moving the studio over to Europe. So I'm going to see Europe before I can't anymore, before I go to LA. So I'll be working from Europe, which should be interesting. Why not? I'm putting myself so far out of the comfort zone that that I don't even know what comfort feels like anymore. So yeah, thank you guys for watching this. If you made it to the end, Jesus, what are you doing? But no, I genuinely appreciate it, and please know that I do want to keep doing more videos and such. I just have to get this whole career thing going while it's happening. I have to be present within it, and these deadlines and bigger projects are they're a lot harder than the fan films and occasional trailer cues we used to do. So I hope you can appreciate that at least. And you know, like whenever I stream and such, please do come join in, because you know, I do these videos for you guys because, you know, I like interacting with you all. So like I mentioned, the best way to stay up to date with what I'm doing is to follow me on Twitter. Like I always update whenever I'm going to do a video or something. Will always be updated there because I can do it from my phone wherever I am. So my handle's at H2Daniel. So that's H, then the number 2, then Daniel. Follow me there and feel free to send me a message for the next vlog. I will post on Twitter asking for questions for the next one. And the next one, I will probably show you some of the big percussion I've been working on, because I can show that without giving away the game. Yeah, so thanks for watching today, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.